Yes. So my name is Savannah Schuurbeers, and I'm European Democracy Coordinator at the European Citizen Action Service, also known as ECAS, one of the 12 partner organizations in the Bolster Consortium, which is led by Tilburg University. For those of you who may be new to Bolster, the project's full name is Bridging Organizations and Marginalized Communities for Local Sustainability Transitions in Europe. This project is funded by the European Union's Horizon Europe program, and our goal is to explore how marginalized communities and vulnerable groups are impacted by the European Green Deal policies and assess how involving them in decision-making can increase support for sustainability transitions. So as part of this effort, ECAS and the consortium are hosting a series of 10 online policy dialogues, each focusing on regions undergoing just transition processes. Through these dialogues, we aim to foster cross-regional comparisons by sharing lessons learned from regions across Europe that are grappling with green transitions. To start things off, we have a couple of quick icebreaker questions for you, the audience, which should now pop up on your screen. We go to the next slide. Yes. So you can see the Slido questionnaire details. If you're with your phone, you can quickly scan the QR code or go through the website and use the login and password details. So I'll give a second for that. So with these questions, we'd love to know where you're joining us from. So please let us know what city or region you're joining us from today. And then the second question, we would like to know how familiar you are with the topic of just transition in the EU. So your answers will really help us get a sense of our audience's knowledge level today. So as everyone is filling out the questionnaire, I'll go into a little bit more detail about what today's dialogue is actually about. So today's dialogue will focus on how territorial just transition plans can truly be inclusive towards marginalized communities. Our spotlight today will be on Stara Zagora region in Bulgaria. And so to enrich the upcoming panel discussion, which is actually the second part of this event, we're inviting participants to please complete the brief questionnaire, which is also on the same Slido link. You will see it pop up once the presentations begin. So if you haven't had a chance to do so yet when you receive the email invitation, please do so by connecting to the Slido questionnaire throughout the event. You're also welcome to edit or add your responses as the presentations go along, and this will really help us enrich the panel discussions as our panelists will be able to reflect on the answers you given today. So maybe we can go to the next slide and have a quick look about where our audience is coming from today.
For some reason, this, okay, it's active, good.
So we have some participants, obviously, from Sofia, other parts of Bulgaria, Stara Zagora. We also have some participants from Romania, Brussels, Poland. We have some participants from Greece, Western Macedonia. So very diverse group of participants this morning. Thank you so much for joining us. Perhaps we can go to the next slide. So how familiar are you with the topic of just transition in the EU? So we have a majority who have either a solid background or basic knowledge of the just transition. So it'll be really interesting to see how the conversation evolves throughout the event. We also have some experts. Okay, so far no one that is not familiar with the topic at all. So thank you everyone for engaging us in this little activity. Thank you for your input. It's great to see such a diverse group of participants. As I mentioned, today's dialogue is structured in two parts. So the first part of the dialogue will feature presentations from a diverse set of speakers reflecting on the experiences of several just transition regions. The second part will feature a panel discussion on the broader topic of fostering engagement and improving access to funds for marginalized communities in just transition regions. So perhaps we can go to the next slide. Yes, thank you. So as I mentioned, these presentations, we are joined today by Professor Kristina Nikolova, also Alexandra Lulace, Dr. Artur Ochowski, and Romina Alexieva. So without further delay, I'm pleased to hand the floor over to our first presenter, Professor Dr. Kristina Nikolova from the University of National and World Economy in Sofia, Bulgaria, who will provide a short presentation on the regional research work Bolster has conducted in Bulgaria. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Savannah. Good morning or hello, everyone. My name is Kristina Nikolova. I am a professor at the University of National and World Economy in Sofia, and I'm a principal coordinator of Bolster activities here in Bulgaria. My presentation today is dedicated to a brief overview of the Just Transition Plans and Bolster findings in the region of Stara Zagora with a particular focus of marginalized communities. To briefly outline the content, please, next slide. The content of today's presentation, actually, I will put an accent on the current developments of Territorial Just Transition Plan of Stara Zagora region. I'll share with you our insights from the project regarding perceptions and expectations of marginalized groups. And I will outline the top priorities coming from our activities in the region of Stara Zagora for just transition for marginalized communities and local stakeholders. Next slide, please. As you already have heard, our main aim of the whole project is to understand how marginalized communities are affected by the European Green Deal and especially by the just transition, and to see how to involve these marginalized communities in decision-making process to increase the support for transition plans and to involve all these groups into the just transition. Next slide, please. And our main focus is the region of Stara Zagora. The Stara Zagora district is home to 4 coal-fired thermal power plants and mines here in Bulgaria, making it most affected by the transition, especially regarding job losses. Actually, it is expected that because of coal phase out, almost 11,000 employees will lose their jobs, and the district's leading gross value-added position is primarily due to energy complex Maritsa East, which is the biggest complex in the country, as you could see from the information on the slide. And this is why our primary focus is on the region's future development, especially on the opportunities to include marginalized communities in the process of just transition. Most affected communities are workers in coal mines, workers in thermal power plants, and of course, their relatives, their families, and other marginalized groups. We are going to discuss further this issue later on while commenting our findings from the project. Next slide, please. Speaking about the current development and recent developments on the Territorial Just Transition Plan in Stara Zagora, actually the plan was have been approved 1 year later after the starting of the whole initiative on the European level. As you could see, as of 21st of December 2023, and actually first calls for project are opened now. During the summer were published first calls, and because of political instability in Bulgaria, it was a little bit difficult to progress with the plans, but I think all of us, we believe that it will be a success story. As you could see here, timeline for the future developments is related to lessening emissions from coal-fired power plants, creation of new jobs in other economic areas, final shutdown of coal mines and thermal power plants based on coal, and up to 2038, we expect some 15,000 new jobs to be created in other sectors due to properly implemented just transition plans in our region. Next slide, please. The main areas of funding related to Territorial Just Transition Plan of the Stara Zagora regions are related to three main pillars. The first pillar is sustainable energy solution for industry. Here, some different measures related, for example, to reclamation of mining grounds, support for creation of hydrogen-based value chains, creation of clean technology industrial parks with zero emissions facilities, stimulus packages for investors in the region, and support for photovoltaic parks with electrolyzer and energy storage systems, promotion of the use of green hydrogen, production, distribution, and utilization of biomethane, plant biomass, energy production, and so on. The second area of priority measures envisaged in Territorial Just Transition Plan for Stara Zagora is social and employment support, including mapping the skills of the affected workforce, retaining and upskilling measures for energy efficiency, tackling energy poverty, and supporting consumers and energy communities. And the third pillar is related to diversification of local economy. Here are some measures related to enterprise diversification, adaptation to economic transitions, and research and development support are included. We could say that energy efficiency measures are planned for residential buildings, focusing on helping energy poor households and vulnerable consumers. The goal here is to address energy poverty by reducing energy consumption, by lowering electricity bills, and cutting greenhouse gas emissions. Additionally, the Just Transition plans are to support consumers and to promote establishing renewable energy communities. This will improve living conditions and contribute to a more sustainable future. Many of the suggested measures and investments have been allocated to setting up a value chain to green hydrogen. The plan for a territorial just transition involves creating a complete value chain for green hydrogen. This chain will be produced using energy generated from the wind or solar power projects currently under development in the region. Probably our speakers and panelists today will discuss further on this topic. The Maritze East coal complex is set to be transformed into a zero-emission industrial park with the help of different funds allocated for production and supply of biomethane. The project also includes energy efficiency measures and renewable energy investments and address energy poverty, as I have already mentioned. And the government has stated that local just transition commissions will be set up to ensure a bottom-up approach and consider the interests of the communities in Stara Zagora area. Actually, the local subcommittees have already been established, and they include, actually the local subcommittee in Stara Zagora include 25 members, and among these 25 members are the mayors of 9 municipalities, representatives of 4 employers organizations, trade unions, non-governmental organizations, Trakia University, and other state institutions. We could summarize that among the highlights of the plan for the area of Stara Zagora, there are specific measures intended to create a new industrial park in Marica East based on a consulted master plan for the development of the complex and the development of other areas in Stara Zagora, reclamation of terrains from which lignite was mined by establishing a special company, which is a little bit controversial question at the moment here in Bulgaria. And the company will prepare the infrastructure for new industrial activities. Another important task is to attract large investors to produce electrolyzer systems, fuel cells, charging stations, and other facilities, and to create hydrogen value chain that will provide alternative employment and ensure the energy transition. The plan is intended to support photovoltaic parks as well, with electrolyzers for employment in the construction and maintenance of these parks, and to support measures and projects for producing biomethane based on low emission organic residues, as well as for producing energy from wind turbines, which is also expected to create new jobs. And the Ministry of Energy points out that investments from large enterprises will also be supported in the region of Stara Zagora, and more than 20 companies have so far expressed their preliminary interest. Next slide, please. As I have already mentioned, the first two calls for projects were announced in the summer of this year. The first one on the 27th of May this year. It is intended to support the Just Transition subcommittees for the implementation of the Territorial Just Transition Plans. The areas of funding mentioned in these calls are related to building capacity in the regional administrations in Stara Zagora, to provide logistical and technical support for subcommittees. And actually the amount of funding available is up to 500,000 Bulgarian levs, or around 256,000 euro. Next slide, please. The second call was announced on 18th of June. It is intended for support for sustainable energy renovation of multi-family residential buildings. Eligible activities here are activities for implementation of energy efficiency measures, construction and installation activities related to urgent measures for energy efficiency, and for energy efficiency audits, and so on. The total amount of the grant under this procedure is around 100.5, let's say, million euro. And actually the minimum sum here for application is around, actually maximum sum is around 9.5 million euro. Next slide, please. Speaking about our activities, bolster activities in the region and insights from the marginalized communities, we held 22 interviews, 11 interviews with local stakeholders, and another 11 semi-structured interviews with marginalized representatives of marginalized communities. We established multi-actor forums in Stara Zagora and have had 3 rounds of discussions with them. And also we established local Just Transition Alliance in Stara Zagora region. And again, we had 3 rounds of discussions, and I'm going later on to summarize the results of these discussions. And we identified 3 main groups and concentrate our attention on 3 main groups. This is the groups of youth, Actually, this is the only group identified by the Territorial Just Transition Plan of Stara Zagora and included as a potentially affected group by the Just Transition, and two other groups, groups of women and Roma community. Next slide, please. During our discussions with representatives of these local communities, we somehow tried to achieve and results and to receive more information about their perceptions and experiences concerning just transitions. We could conclude it in three main areas. First area of their perceptions and experiences during this time is the lack of dialogue and lack of trust. Actually, they pointed out that the Just Transition Plan may not meet the needs of marginalized communities in Stara Zagora, and it may not fulfill their hopes for a better quality of life and a seamless shift away from coal industry. On the other hand, marginalized communities do not have any representations in political and civic platforms. This is their perception, not our statement, but their perception. They actually pointed out that the lack of clear communication from regional and national authorities, and we could summarize that people feel unheard and unsupported, unfortunately. With regards to the second area, scarce new economic opportunities, our respondents stated that transitioning away from coal and other traditionally related mining industries will leave the community without viable economic alternatives, exacerbating poverty and unemployment. They stated that the Territorial Just Transition Plan is practically unknown for them, especially to the Roma population. Local and national authorities, they say that they could do more to facilitate the creation of a novel economic model that guarantees income and jobs for the local population. They pointed out also on the development of the health sector, and their opinion is that the health sector has been grossly neglected and is currently viewed as a top priority by the local communities. And they fear they lack skills required for new industries and opportunities, which necessitates urgent targeted training and education programs. And of course, there is a big fear of high unemployment in the future. With regards to environmental issues, marginalized communities in Stara Zagora live in areas more exposed to environmental hazards, and due to industrial and other activities, they need some more environmental protection measures, which are crucial for their economic and social well-being. They depend on natural resources, and environmental degradation inevitably directly affects their livelihoods. And there is an urgent need to protect nature and take care of it. And it is perceived to be a part of the culture that modern people should possess. However, reducing carbon emissions, for example, is perceived as not directly related to nature, but to economic and political interests. With regards to the identification of key roadblocks and opportunities, here we could summarize these roadblocks and opportunities stated by the marginalized communities in Stara Zagora in three main areas. The first is strategies for overcoming existing boundaries. Our respondents pointed out that they need, it is necessary to implement a comprehensive program for new enterprise creation in the region, investments in professional education, They stated that it is necessary to ensure better living standards instead of accepting lower paid jobs in Stara Zagora. On the other hand, in their opinion, transition should be slow for people to be able to requalify and adapt to new working places. New jobs should be designed to provide adequate salaries, and replacing carbon-intensive industries with greener ones presents a critical economic opportunities, in their opinion, once again. The second area is related to communication with policymakers, very important area. The local people would like to influence decisions that could impact the region's economic prospects. And with regards to environmental issues, they mentioned issues related to waste collection and disposal. They pointed out that it is necessary to improve a waste management culture in Stara Zagora. They also identified that city planning could be better to achieve a greener and cleaner environment, and it is necessary, in their opinion, to elaborate on possible direct marketing and communication plans to promote recycling, for example, for the region. And they identified the need for a balanced approach to use solar power panels to avoid the destruction of fertile agricultural ground and land. Next slide, please. We could summarize, actually, we summarized top priorities for marginalized communities and for local stakeholders using our findings from discussions with multi-actor forums and local just transition alliances. For marginalized communities, the top priorities are related to the employment and reskilling, to green territorial development through a change in the economic model, to active citizen involvement and improvement of the health and education services, as well as transparent governance, communication and support for small and medium-sized enterprises, because many of our respondents actually think that they could establish some small enterprises in order to switch from from a coal value chain to some other activities. And with regards to the top priorities for local stakeholders, they need targeted mechanisms for retaining, attracting, and developing both the financial and human capital necessary for the development of the region. On the other hand, they pointed out on the development of the necessary infrastructure for a new local economy, financial instruments to support large industries and small and medium-sized enterprises, and coordinated human capital development, which is the most important thing in their opinion. And they pointed out that targeted financial support for vulnerable groups. They stated that an adequate information campaign explaining the inevitability of the just transition at the multiple levels and among different groups is crucial for understanding this process and for participation in this process. Next slide, please. And finally, we concluded and summed up a core vision of marginalized communities for just transition in Stara Zagora. We actually here concentrated our attention on three main areas, as you could see from the slide, related to increasing the well-being of people in Stara Zagora, awareness raising and communication, and specific measures for skilling, reskilling, and for creation of new jobs in the region. I'm not going to go through all these measures suggested, but this is an insight from our project and from our discussions and many meetings in Stara Zagora. This is from my side. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Christina, for really that comprehensive overview of the latest developments in the Just Transition Plans in Stara Zagora, as well as some insights into your work with the marginalized communities under the Bolster project. So we will dive deeper into some of these issues. I think there will also be some cross-regional similarities that we will see. And there will also be some time for questions from the audience after our presentation. So please keep your questions in mind, or if you already have them, feel free to put them in the chats. You can also raise your hand during the Q&A session, but if you already have an idea, please feel free to put it in the chat. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Alexandra Lulac from Make Better Association Romania. Alexandra, the floor is yours.
Hi, thank you. So I won't spend too much time talking about the Bolster project since Christina already detailed on that so well. I'm part of the research team that did the same research process in Romania, specifically in the Prahova region. Just a bit of background information. Prahova is the hotspot of the Romanian oil and gas industry. It has a very long history in that. It is one of the, let's say, global pioneers in the last centuries. But it has already started diversifying its economy as I think maybe other regions experienced in Eastern Europe in the post-socialist transition, kind of coupled with an industrial shift where a lot of jobs were already lost in the 90s and 2000s, which led to a diversification of the economy, but also a demographic decline. So the region is kind of marked by a history of migration, low trust in the local public authority, a very underdeveloped civic sector, especially compared to other regions in Romania. There's a very small number of NGOs and civil society organizations. And as we will see, the Just Transition Plan, the whole elaboration process was carried out kind of behind closed doors. This is the overall context we're in. Can we move on to the next slide? So today I'd like to kind of talk about a twofold problem in Prahova that affected the ability of marginalized groups to have a say in the just transition process. First, it was their limited involvement in consultation and planning, specifically in the Territorial Just Transition Plans. And second, the very rigid structure of the disbursement of funds from the central level. It had a one-size-fits-all approach, which didn't actually allow regions to apply a diversity of measures that reflected the specific priorities of each place. Next slide, please. So the way this process was structured in Romania, there was at the beginning, there was an international consortium of international experts that provided technical assistance to formulate the plans. But the whole process was coordinated by the Ministry of Investment and European Projects. So this ministry also is the one that releases the calls for projects and manages the actual Just Transition Fund. At a regional level, in Romania, there were 6 eligible regions. This process was coordinated by the county councils who designed the Just Transition Plans and then coordinate the relevant working groups. The relevant working groups are mix of diverse actors who join the discussion table at the local level to actually formulate this vision of a just transition. But it is the county councils who decide who is invited to bring their concerns forward. Next slide, please. So who was not invited to the conversation table? As you can see, in the Prahova working group, only one local municipality was invited, and it was Ploiești, that is the county seat, the largest and richest in the region. There are public agencies such as the Employment Agency or Environment Agency, the Oil and Gas University, and then the rest, they were all established private sector players, particularly the large refineries and major oil and gas sector enterprises. So what we can see is that small urban or rural municipalities were not included, although they represent This is where most of the commuting workers come from to a bigger city like Ploiești. They also concentrate the remaining extraction sites and also a lot of existing or disused refining and processing sites. So they're very connected and relevant to this whole industry, but they were not represented in the consultation process. There are also no NGOs or civil society organizations at all. So no mechanism to represent citizens, and apart from the, let's say, meetings, there were no participatory exercises dedicated to citizens on the sidelines. And moreover, structurally marginalized groups, in our case, that would be youth, women, Roma, and also people who lost their jobs in the past transition in the 90s and 2000s. They were not engaged formally in any way. I think the words of a county council representative summed it up really well. He said, if you ask activists, they will probably tell you they weren't consulted, but in my opinion, only very big projects should be considered for the just transition that will really bring an added value, especially for jobs. So we can see that from the very beginning, the consultation process to formulate these plans, at least in Prahova, was pretty restricted to the powerful formal players. Can we move on to the next slide? Thanks. Sorry, can I actually move to the next slide because I switched the order? Yes. So, 1 second, please. What did this group actually come up with? What jobs is one of the big concerns of public actors, but the research showed that job absorption wouldn't actually be that difficult. The economy is already diversified. Unemployment rates are pretty low right now. But there is this big fear of repeating an episode from the past transition, in which a lot of people were unemployed en masse. But in the end, let's say the local priorities of public actors were diversifying the economy, stimulating entrepreneurs to transition to new sectors, helping the current employees to transition towards new jobs, so reskilling. They put a particular emphasis on supporting large corporations, so the existing oil and gas players, to decarbonize, to improve their operations. And there are also mentions in investing in clean energy, retrofitting buildings, and the decontamination of polluted sites, which is a major problem with oil and gas. When we discussed to marginalized groups, in a similar process that Christina mentioned in Bulgaria, we found slightly different priorities. So we talked to NGOs, members of marginalized groups like youth, women, Roma, people from small localities who are not engaged in the process. So they prioritized intercommunity transport networks because the economy is at the very regional level now, that very local factories or businesses already closed. An improvement in public services, particularly public green areas. Recycling and waste management was also very big. Connection to utilities for marginalized urban areas, particularly segregated neighborhoods. Energy poverty, especially for severely marginalized groups, was a major concern. A lot of emphasis was placed on social infrastructure. They made these comparisons between Prahova of old, in the 80s, for example, 60s to the 80s, when they had a lot of cultural infrastructure, education, sports, opportunities to spend free time. And now they struggle with a lot of abandoned land plots, particularly buildings that are, we could call now industrial heritage, which are in very central locations, but are completely disused or even polluting, and which could really be regenerated to serve as the public good. Decontamination and pollution was also a major concern for citizens, not only air pollution, but There are these oil reserve lakes which infiltrate into the ground and affect the quality of water as well. But mostly they, in a way, in discussions, including with people that are currently employed in oil and gas, they were saying, we are quite skilled. For example, young people that studied petroleum engineering already switched to other sectors, to other economic sectors. Other people found, people started finding jobs already, but they put more emphasis on the people who lost their jobs in the past, who are now having a much lower quality of life with reduced income, or to marginalized groups that still face a lot of barriers in accessing jobs, such as Roma. Now, from all of these priorities, let's say the vision from the powerful actors, the political actors, and the vision from the ground, what ended up happening in the calls for projects was even more simplistic. So until now, the ministry only opened one call dedicated to small and medium-sized enterprises, existing ones, to buy equipment or services to scale up their business in the hope that that would grow their number of employees. Now, there are several concerns even from public authorities in Prahova about this approach, because the research showed that SMEs themselves are too small to actually absorb the 3,000. There would be a gap of 3,000 people between the opportunities to generate new jobs and the current employees that would need to transition, and that we would need to think about bigger projects. But also there would be a significant skill gap between the technical expertise of current employees and the ones required by existing SMEs. Can we move to the slide that was above? Yes. This is what the money actually went on so far. So from all of the, let's say, very valid themes proposed both at the EU level in the conception of a just transition, but also at the local level with discussions with citizens, NGOs, or local players, like in green solutions, energy poverty and energy communities, social and cultural infrastructure, green public services, decontamination and pollution mitigation. Those were all unaddressed by calls. And by the actual funding spending. There were two other calls which are said that they will open, but there has been no communication about when they will open. One is for region employment agencies to carry out reskilling of current employees, and one for micro enterprises to scale up, but they are currently not operational, and the communication around when they will open was not very transparent. So right now, the only open call is for small and medium-sized enterprises that already exist to diversify or to grow. So far, the only contracts that were signed were in tourism, so hotel expansion, or let's say businesses that work in steel or in pastry to open up tourism villas, for medical services and equipment, some warehouses and transports and logistics, and investments in the food industry. What I'd like to point out is even if where the money does end up and seems quite, let's say, fractured from the Just Transition vision and only looks at this idea of jobs, even if it were meant to cater for jobs, there's still a gap between the current employees who are, let's say, specialized in welding or they're locksmiths, and the needs of a new villa for tourism opening up. And the bridges that could, let's say, make this connection, such as reskilling, are currently not addressed functionally. And in the meantime, while focusing only on jobs, other aspects that can contribute to a just transition are completely sidelined by funding opportunities, such as the ones in the gray in the image. Can we move on to the last slide, please? So to conclude, I think it's important to note that in Prahova, compared to other regions in Romania, the consultative process was more restricted to powerful actors. Other regions did use it as an opportunity to carry out a participatory process. It built new alliances, and it extended policy discussions to the public, and it really invited them to reimagine the place they live in. But what was interesting to see is that even if Prahova would have had a more engaging process and a more inclusive process, the way that the central level administration responded still diminishes the potential positive effects of a more consultative process, because it didn't really allow regions to act on their ground level realities. So from all of the particular priorities of each region, which were pretty different between themselves, the only functional aspect was supporting SMEs. So from our observations, we'd say that there are three factors that would make the just transition process really more just and responsive to marginalized groups. First, to involve a diversity of actors in the planning stages. Second, to approach a transition in a holistic way beyond the employment narrative alone. Then three, to be able to have a place-based approach to funding to really respond to local realities specifically. That's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexandra. And thank you for your presentation and touching upon how the Just Transition Plans were elaborated in this region, to what extent different stakeholders were involved in the process, and what the local vision for the Just Transition is based on your work. I see we already have a question in the chat, so thank you very much. We will address them after the presentations, as we are running a bit behind schedule. So without further delay, I'm pleased to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Artur Ochojski from the University of Economics in Katowice, Poland. Please, Artur, the floor is yours.
Many thanks, Savannah. Welcome to all of you. I'll be speaking about a Polish case this time, and I think because we've started a little bit earlier with everything being planned, and we've had a long story behind this, I think I can move on to a very specific case that I will present instead of presenting the whole picture of Just Transition Plan that was developed in Upper Silesia. So let's move on to the next slide, please. As I'm seated in the academic background, we are trying to understand better some of the specificities of processes happening with regards to sustainable transitions. This is one of the research parts that we've conducted recently. It's still ongoing in process because this is a living organism, as we are talking about one of the measures of just transition. So I'll be trying to pick up some of the best, let's say, ideas that we've selected with regards to empowering individuals and communities, and to what extent they do benefit of these funds that are delivered to those groups. Let's move on. All right, so just a panoramic picture of Upper Silesia. We're talking about one of the biggest just transition plans in Europe, worth nearly 2.2 billion euro, and the total in Poland is 3.5 billion. And we are talking about a region that has 7 coal mining, nuts 3 sub-regions with a total population of 3.8 million people. These sub-regions are listed here, but it's just to give you the idea that we are talking about a highly populated area. Please move on. Out of many of the measures that were programmed for Silesia. As you can see, there is a list of those measures. I'm particularly focusing on one of them today, which is the measure 1024 that touches on social inclusion. Of course, we do have a lot of those trying to help people with brownfields, with enterprises that need to transit from coal mining area. There's also a lot of things happening behind renewable energy sources, water being improved. There's things happening to skills, to higher education, to vocational training, etc. But the thing is that we are really trying to understand to what extent social inclusion is happening there, as just transition is not only about building new workplaces, it's also about the social inclusion and leaving no one behind, right? So with this QR code, I will list it again at the very end, so you will have a chance. You can see directly the documents that can build the bigger picture of what I'm referring to. So don't worry, you can still have a look in the website of the official website of the Marshall Office, because as I said, I will be beaming this at the very end. So let's move on to the next slide, please. Right, when we talk about this measure, it should be strengthening the process of just transition with regards to social inclusion. You have a couple of, let's say, keywords that were somehow programmed for this particular measure. We're talking about the support for families that are somehow related to mining industry employees. I will stress this word somehow because you can also see that we're talking about local communities that are most affected by this transition process. So in a sense, the geographical area is more the denominator of being included rather than, let's say, the legitimation of being part of the mining industry family or something, right? When we talk about this measure, we really want to understand what it means that the quality of life should be improved, and that there is also this social, professional, civic activities of communities that are somehow leading and maintaining and helping to cover these transformation processes. So because that has been programmed, we as part of Bolster, but also as those who try to understand these processes for many years, we're trying to have a look to what extent this is successful or not, what should be somehow given particular attention. And because of that, we also want to understand to what extent these social integration programs are somehow successfully building the social capital and building these grassroots initiatives. This particular measure should be building conscious participation of residents in climate change and transformation. This is one of those things that I think are the common denominator for all the presentations that we've seen today, and I think that's the language of the narration of the European Union. So I think that's something that we would be really welcoming if that's possible. Of course, to be able to do that, like Christina mentioned, you need to have these capacities of social partners and civil society. You need to have these capacities of people, like grassroots initiatives need really capacities of people being not only able to do things, but also willing to do things. And I think that's one of the major issues that we are studying in Bolster, and one of the major issues that many of those projects that are funded to help just transition are looking forward to. Let's move on to the next slide. Of course, we have an academic background that we've tried to put onto the picture, but it's not an academic speech today. So let me just give you one hint here, and let me explain why I'm using this particular notion of research. we are not only willing to understand whether these, let's say, commitment or these processes are there, but we're also willing to understand to what extent they can be sustainable in a sense that they are maintained for a longer, let's call it strategic purpose, right? So for that reason, we've tried also to understand from the academic perspective if that is something happening. To understand it, we need to know what are the, let's say, criteria. So for that, we are using these criteria of transitions to sustainability, which is reflexibility, operationality, tactical aspects and strategic aspects on board. For that it means actually that it's not only about seeing people doing things, but also trying to understand if there is this continuous learning, if there is action and experimentation that can lead to changes in institutions and in infrastructures. And that's, let's say, a sustainable, the definition of sustainability in transitions. Let's move on to the next slide. Because we are still in a process. We are talking about 200 projects that were already submitted to the Marshal Office, to the Managing Authority. Out of those 200 projects, 74 were either accepted or are still being negotiated. So the success rate is around 35%. And we are talking about projects that could reach up to 2% of the allocation of Just Transition Fund, which means that we are talking about around 40 million euro. So it's a very small, let's say, portion of the whole budget, but still very promising one. And we are talking about something that is to be still investigated because the process has started. It's just the first initiatives that are there. So the observations for the moment are that basically we are talking about operational activities, right? So it's setting up the ground. It's more like building the entry to start initiating the changes, which is basically facilitating the process by means of very specific actions. It can be either, let's say, a small club of women trying to work together towards something more tangible. It can be something related to a group of youth meeting together, trying to discuss some topics. But the goal is that these preliminary actions, as we can say, or operational activities, they should be initiating according to the Just Transition program, Just Transition Plan. They should be actually leading to setting up the mindset and finally bringing some initiatives. The single initiative can be of any particular understanding. It can be something that is helping the people towards, let's say, better quality of life, because the transition processes are giving some kind of barriers for that. So it's just the beginning of a process, but the question is to what extent it can be sustainable. This is something that we are trying to understand. Maybe it's still too early to say, yes, the sustainability is there. But what we can say for sure is that these trainings, workshops, there's it can be games as well, or some kind of, as I said, civic clubs. This is something that should initiate and it should incubate these bottom-up initiatives. The logic of these projects is built around initiatives that have some value. So it's around, let's say, 1,500 euros, right? 1,500 euros that the applicants can get for specific actions. And this is particularly interesting to what extent people will look forward to that. Of course, because of this general expectation and the channeling down from the European Union, there are some results and there are some measures that are already programmed. So we are talking about activation of women. We're talking about youth being in particular involved in these operations, and we are also talking about seniors being like intergenerational aspects. For that, we can see that integration has become one of the keywords because of the requirements of this call. Ecology, of course, and local identity. So these could be seen as the key values that somehow should be promoted by those projects. And I think it was successfully programmed into these calls, and the applicants understood that, yes, this is the way we should organize the actions. Let's move on to the last slide, I think. Right. As I mentioned, we are talking about specific interest from the perspective of the managing authority. The core idea is to really get hands on the territories that are being vulnerable to mining restructure, to coal mine restructuring, which means that they are limiting the geographical scope to sub regions or NUTS 3 regional units. If we talk about these groups, then based on the criteria of selection of those projects, we can talk about groups that are endangered with marginalizations, which is youth, women, and seniors. So that could be seen as a way to handle the marginalized groups, because as we know from the research in Bolster, these could be actually seen as the most marginalized groups in our region, which is primarily youth, women. When we talk about seniors, there is another group that we are trying to work with in Bolster, which is the pensioners from the coal mines, because we believe that they are really knowledgeable and they can be very helpful. On the other hand, they are not those who are being hurt. So there is, I think, a good way to explain Upper Silesia still trying to work with the process of social inclusion and fighting with marginalization by means of very simple tools. First, activate people, give them some capacity, give them some encouragement, and then try to give them some simple instruments to achieve the goal of being more included. I think just to conclude, I think it may become, when we talk about transition that is sustainable per se, it may be something that we will enjoy. It may become a reality, but there is a clear message behind this measure, behind this program, that the beneficiaries should receive very careful impulse from the managing authority, and that they should continuously expand their aspirations and the know-how on just transition. If we don't keep on moving this direction, we may lose the momentum, because we can see exactly that many of those that applied for the funds are particularly those that are usual suspects. So these are the usual players who get the money from the European Commission for this or that particular funding, in many cases, not everyone, but in many cases. And that brings some questions. To what extent we can really trust the leaving no one behind is a reality of every day, and to what extent it's just consuming the money because it's there. But I think there is this consciousness of this impulse, and since we are still in contact with our managing authority, with the Marshal Office and the departments that deal with just transition, we've had a lot of discussions with them as academics, and I think one of the let's say bright sides of this research is that we've managed to establish a good let's say focus point on what should be done, and I think it's going to happen. So the managing authority is really aware of these things. which I'm really glad that our research is not only academic research, but it's really reaching out to the society. The last slide, as I promised, will help you to get some potential knowledge about things happening. As I promised, more on the call you can find in this with this QR code on the website. It's in Polish, but you can easily translate these things. And if you scroll down, there is a bar, and after that you will find all the details, including the regulations, including the lists and the names of those projects that actually tell you a lot. I think next time we'll bring more results of this research. As I said, this is just preliminary. Thank you so much, and I'm looking forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Archer. And thank you for sharing the slide with more information. I'm sure our participants would be very interested to go to this website. And also we will be uploading the presentations online, and the recording will also be available, and we will also have a summary of the dialogue. So if you missed anything throughout, do not worry, you will still have access to it later. So we are also joined by Remina Alexieva from the Center for the Study of Democracy in Bulgaria, who will give a brief overview of Democratizing Just Sustainability Transitions project, DUST project. So please go ahead. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Savannah, for inviting me to have the floor, and also I would have the honor to close this panel. So I hope you're not too kind of sleepy and bombarded with information. I hope to be quick and perhaps maybe wrap up with some of the points that were already discussed previously. Some of the people that are here as panelists, I know their work, and while I was listening, I was thinking that it's great that we're kind of constantly thinking about synergies between the different projects and initiatives that are taking place. The different methodologies, obviously, they make a difference, but it's actually really valuable to share this experience in these different points of view that we're looking at the just transition. If I can have the next slide. So very, very briefly, Center for the Study of Democracy. I'm an analyst at the Energy and Climate Program, and we work on just transition, but also on many other different topics. Concretely, we're working on foreign influence issues that are related to the energy sector. Also, we do some modeling on decarbonization pathways for Bulgaria, but also for other countries. And we have our very own sociological team that also often we work together on such issues that are also related to the energy and climate sphere, but also touch upon marginalized, hard to reach groups and more kind of soft social methods. So this in brief is what we do. It's a lot, but we really do believe that it's very kind of crucial to have this bridge between what the scholars say and what the scholars research and the policymaking field, and kind of advocating for how to solve the issues that we're researching. Next slide. Here, within this event, I would like to focus on our work as part of the DUST project. Arthur is also part of our team, which I'm happy to see him here. And this also refers to the synergies that we're doing with both projects. So we're again looking at just sustainability transitions. We're having a broader look on just transition with this included sustainability element. And we kind of have this more open approach to marginalized community, and as we call them, least engaged communities. So we have this broader view that kind of encompasses also groups that are not only excluded from society, but also that might be unwilling to participate. So not only those that are enabled, but also unwilling. So this would mean, in our case, in the case of Stara Zagora, but also in the other regions as part of the project. This might be people engaged in the minor sector themselves, who might not be willing to engage that much. So we're working with a broader view of kind of marginalized communities. And as part of the project, we've kind of looked at very different methodological perspectives on just sustainability transitions and what it means to actually participate in these transitions. And now we're kind of getting into the way where we start to work more locally within the regions. We already conducted interviews and focus groups that I'm gonna share with you some results for a bit later. But also as part of this, we have this encompassing activity of doing a series of talks with people from the region that we identify in order to create sort of a unified vision for what it means to participate and also how we can actually solve the social and economic issues that are in place. And we also work, more methodologically on democratic governance, so these multi-level governance structures and how they can better work in practice within the regions. Can we have the next slide? As part of the project, you can also learn more on our website. We upload all of our reports and deliverables. We also have, all the social media channels. So we're constantly updating our content as the work is very much ongoing. But here I wanted to briefly share with you what it was like working with least engaged communities in the case of Stara Zagora. So as part of this activity, we worked with the regional agency in Stara Zagora, and we very much decided and wanted to work with women. So as part of our focus groups, we conducted focus groups with young women who are studying at university and above 18. Women actively engaged in the coal and mining sector. Most of them were occupied in the training and development kind of divisions within the Maritzes complex and also some of the companies, and retired women. So women who have worked directly in the energy sector and they have recently retired. And we also had one very interesting case, now a slightly older woman that have actually worked on building the complex itself. So she was actually there, working very physically demanding in the complex, which was also very interesting to observe. So as part of our discussions with them, you can see on the slide some of our main conclusions. Obviously, distrust was something that was mentioned very often in terms of what is impeding their participation in the transition as a whole. All groups shared they did not feel kind of trust that was amplified by the institutions, but also the private actors. And also that oftentimes, especially in terms of the women who are now still engaged in the coal and mining sector, they very much reported that there's a lot of uncertainty as to what's going to happen in the future with their workplace, but also in general, that was kind of impeding them participating or having any sort of trust and accountability for that process. Also, all of the women that we spoke to they reported that they do not feel confident in the government's capabilities, something that is very much also evident from the Bolster project. So clearly there is governmental capacity, some that is not in place. Perhaps there is a slight delay, even if decisions are being made on a central level, but the decisions being made solely on a central level without kind of much opportunities for involvement on the regional level is a big barrier for the participation of women. We also kind of talked about inclusivity, and here it was interesting to see that the younger focus group was actually more positive on this factor, and that they reported that they feel that things are getting more inclusive in terms of participation in sustainability transition and in the policy making. But generally, the other two focus groups that were with slightly older women in terms of age, they reported that the environment generally is not inclusive enough. Also, there was a lot of, I really liked Arthur's slide on kind of finding on path dependence. This was something that was very much discussed in our focus groups as well. And the fact that a lot of the social constructs that impede participation were actually very much entangled in the history of the region, for example, some negative experiences of participants throughout history. And to explain exactly what they mean is that Stara Zagora has kind of a history of different economic sectors rising and then declining throughout, let's say, the last 2 centuries. And there were instances, so people still remember very vividly instances where people were not supported in terms of transitioning into another workplace. And generally they feel that they're very dependent on something. And in case of the coal and mining sector, if this is diminished very very fast manner, this would mean obviously includes a lot of fear and disempowerment. So with these kind of general notes that we found from the focus groups, we produced as part of the project a very comprehensive report and on all of these factors that actually impede, but also could boost citizen participation, particularly of least engaged groups. Can we go to the next slide? So before going back on what comes next on the project, I just wanted to share something that we as CSD were directly involved in and were leading in terms of kind of producing a tool for policymakers that could help in the designing but also implementation process of place-based just transition policies. So now that we have the just transition plans approved, it is very much uncertain on what tools and resources will be used to actually evaluate the effectiveness of implementing these plans, not only in terms of financing, because this was already covered, you know, in terms of who's applying for projects and things like that, but also in terms of involving people throughout the way in a broader sense. So we created this stakeholder engagement and participation index that was informed by various tools that were previously created by experts in the project. And it was designed to specifically evaluate through a set of questions to what extent participation is ensured in just transition policies. In terms of like layout, this is an Excel-based tool, so you can download it on our website, have a look. fill in the questions. Let's say if you're a representative of a municipality, you can very much use this tool to evaluate the level, but also the depth of participation in a certain policy. And you can see in the graph, this is an example result that the tool gives you. The tool is very comprehensive in itself in terms of methodology, but right now we're in the process of piloting it to actually see whether it addresses all of the needs of the local stakeholders. And also, looking ahead, what can be improved further so that the tool is actually very much used by civil society organizations, municipalities, also policymakers on a regional level, and is very much used in practice in the next couple of years. Can we have the next slide? And as a conclusion, I just wanted to say that the brief that looks at all the results from our focus group is on our website, so you can see in depth the different factors that we analyzed from the focus groups, but also that this work is very much ongoing. So now that we have mapped the factors that impede or boost participation, we're delving deeper into the work on a regional and local level with our community champions network. So each region, Stara Zagora included, has a community champion network of active participants in the transition. This might be a civil society organization or local leaders. This is a network of individuals and organizations that could work together and through the DUS project get involved more broadly in their participation in just sustainability transitions, but also share know-how, solve common challenges, and much more. Also here, I would like to mention that Bolster has a similar kind of network or alliance that they have created. So it would be, again, very useful if we collaborate, as we would most probably be working with the same people, to collaborate again on getting together on this. And lastly, working locally with the focus group stakeholders, but also additional policymakers and citizens. We're doing a set of literacy labs that will go from the findings from the focus groups to actually creating a common vision and delving deeper into the challenges and opportunities for the Stara Zagora region. So exciting things are ahead for us in the project, and I very much hope you liked this presentation.
Thank you, Ramina. We're a bit really over time today. So unfortunately, we will not have a chance for a live Q&A, but earlier we received a question in the chat and Alexandra was able to answer in the chat. I see now we have another question. Perhaps maybe our speakers can look at the question, and if they have any answers to that, maybe type it up, just to make sure that everyone is able to get an answer to their questions. And if there are any further questions, I am really so sorry that we're over time, but unfortunately, I don't think we will have a chance to go over them live. So I would ask us now to shift our focus to the panel discussion, which we will explore the broader topic of today's policy dialogue on the challenges and best practice to foster engagement and access to funds for marginalized communities in the just transition regions. Today, we are joined by several speakers with a wealth of expertise and diverse perspectives on the discussion. So perhaps we would go down the list and have every panelist introduce themselves very, very briefly, maximum 1 to 2 minutes. And perhaps we can start with Ivailo Stoyanov.
Yes, hello, colleagues. We are both from the Ministry of Regional Development and
Hello.
Public Works. I'm Ivailo Stoyanov.
And I'm Monica Stoyanova. Together, we are part of the Managing Authority of Program Development of Regions. And we are engaged with the Just Transition process and with the topic for the last 3 years. As Christina already said, Ministry of Energy in Bulgaria was responsible for the elaboration of the territorial plans, and we had supportive functions. Now we had adopted plans from December 2023 and adopted program region development of regions, and we have two procedures already launched. And we are currently preparing the other grant procedure to be launching until the end of the year.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The representatives from the ministry. Next, I would invite Mrs. Zornica Rusinova to introduce herself.
Good morning, everyone. Nice to meet you. My name is Zornica Rusinova. I'm the president of Economic and Social Council of Bulgaria. This is a consultative body consisting of national employers, unions, and civil society organizations as part of the consultative bodies of the National Parliament. And we do have a lot of analytical and opinion work, very similar to what the European Economic and Social Committee is doing on everything that concerns green transition and climate change and energy sector. So I would appreciate if I can make in the beginning some more broader policy opinion and explain what we have done, because we don't go so much deep into the project implementation.
Thank you. Next, I would invite Professor Darina Zaimova to introduce herself.
Hello, thank you very much for inviting me here. My name is Darina Zaimova. I'm professor of economics. Currently, I'm taking the position of the Vice Rector for Research and International Affairs of the university. And under my responsibility falls also the activity of the Institute for Sustainable Transition and Development. We have the chance to be part of some of the meetings that the Bolster team organized, and they met us directly here in Stara Zagora, because Traki University is located in the coal mining region in question, and the target topic of the project. So we have something to share regarding what kind of activities, initiatives, and action has taken our university in terms of green transition in the region. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We are also joined by World Without Borders with representatives Milena Ilieva and Stanimira Pashova, please. You should be able to mute yourself now.
Си пусна микрофона.
We can hear you.
Okay. Can you hear us?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, great. Thank you. Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'll let Milena speak first. Hello.
Perhaps you can start us off. I know Milena had earlier some issues with her camera as well.
Yes, Milena is saying in the chat that she has some issues, so please, Stanimira, you can introduce the World Without Borders. But you need to unmute yourself, please.
Sorry, you're still muted. We cannot hear you. As we would have a general question for Mrs. Rusinova to just introduce the work of the Economic and Social Council in Bulgaria, perhaps you could start us off, and then afterwards the next question we would be happy to have Stanimira introduce World Without Borders.
Thank you very much. As I mentioned in my introduction, the Economic and Social Council of Bulgaria is a consultative body consisting of 36 members who are representing the national employers, unions, and civil society organizations. And within our current mandate, we have set up the green transition as one of our horizontal priorities. This is the reason why for the last almost 2 years and a half, we have issued more than 15 different opinion statements and resolutions on the whole package that the European Commission has introduced as regulation package, and all the strategic documents that concern the green transition in the country, starting from the different versions of the partnership agreement and the National Recovery and Resilience Plan, specific opinion on the 3 territorial just transition plans in Bulgaria. We have been part from the very beginning of the drafts of the plan, issuing different opinions and resolutions. And to a great extent, what was presented today is the result of the really intensive work that, especially on local level, some of our structures of employers and unions did. But on horizontal level, I think that the opinion of the organized civil society was taken in consideration. As I mentioned, we also have different opinions on the strategic legislative initiative, the whole Fit for 55 package, and its Bulgarian context, the social climate fund, the challenges and perspective, and what should be done in order to apply it in the country. Also, what is quite recent right now, this year, we made a resolution on the updated draft of the Integrated National Energy and Climate Plan. In June this year, we made a big analysis on the conditions and opportunities for the coal-fired power generation companies under the transformation of coal regions on low carbon energy. And this year we proposed to government and to national parliament with a resolution that besides the territorial plan, it would be very beneficial for the country to have national just transition plan, taking into consideration all the key tools for making the transitions to climate to a neutral economy, because the concerns of not only marginalized groups but many people in the country are really inflated to a certain extent because of not very sustainable provision of information, especially for the regions that are concerned. And even in the situation of very unstable political debates now, we saw last week what were the consequences when the government proposed to parliament to move on and to adopt some legislation issues concerning the green transition, especially the just transition plans. What I can underline is that in all our opinions, first, our major recommendation was to have good consistency of all strategic documents, because it's very difficult sometimes, especially for smaller municipalities or beneficiaries or NGOs, to really get oriented in all the different types of strategic documents, and there is not sometimes quite good consistencies between the different measures and the consequency of measures. Our second major recommendation, that is more also horizontal, is to have better transparency and better policy dialogue with all stakeholders, because in what we saw in some of the presentations today, still it's not enough in order to really capture the challenges of the local communities, and also to really fine-tune some of the projects in order to target the specific needs of the communities. Especially for regions like Stara Zagora, it's very challenging because it's one of the mostly economically active regions in the country, and the transition and closing the mine industry is affecting not only the sector itself, but the overall economic situation of the whole region, because most of the people and families who are involved in it, they maintain much more higher than the average income for the country, which creates additional economic activities for the whole region. So it's really challenging how all these projects would be implemented. And I think that for further discussions, it would be very valuable if these examples that were demonstrated today can be compared to the rest of the implementation of the instruments in the region, like the partnership agreement with all the programs, the measures that are under the National Recovery and Resilience Plan, and all the others. And our major third recommendations for all these strategic documents is in order to have really targeted measures to provide on first hand map not only of the needed infrastructure and technical implementation project, but also to have a map of the needs and the opportunities of people, especially when it's a matter of qualification, training, and so on. Something that to a great extent was very quickly made on place in order to start the project, but was not very well initially made, especially I talk about Stara Zagora, not so much concerning the other two regions. I think that projects like yours are very valuable for all the member states, because they can really show good comparison between which different member states, how they are approaching the issue, and would lead really to good recommendations in order, especially in the context of the new commission and debate on the next priorities of the coming years for Europe, to have good recommendation how we can really make this transition fairer to everyone who is concerned. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now, moving on to our next question, we would like to build on everything that you've already said, and maybe also focus on how these marginalized groups either have already been engaged or will be engaged in the planning process. We've seen some of this in the presentations, but I would like to invite the ministry to maybe reflect on the next question. We can also move to the next slide, maybe. To which extent and how are marginalized groups involved in the national and regional just transition planning projects in your experience, and what are the obstacles that you might have observed in engaging these groups in the just transition?
Thank you. Regarding these questions, respecting the partnership principle and to ensure control of the process at local level regarding the implementation, and to meet the local needs and to ensure smooth implementation of the territorial plans, we established three local subcommittees, which are subcommittees of the monitoring committee of program development of regions. In Stara Zagora, Pernik, Kyustendil are located. The local subcommittees are program bodies and have very clear responsibilities and functions regarding the implementation and monitoring of the JTF priority. They were set up according to the specificities of the regions, and we are expecting, and we know that the subcommittees will have a key role as a mediation between the national decision makers and between the local stakeholders. Subcommittees include trade unions as representatives, local authorities, NGOs. For the regions of Pernik and Kyustendil, we have youth organizations represented. One of the main functions of the local authorities are at the early stage of the preparation of the procedures to help the managing authority with some probably some information. What are the main needs for the regions, and what are the requirements for development of the regions? This is regarding the subcommittees. Regarding as we already said, we have launched a procedure for support energy efficiency measures in multifamily buildings. With this procedure, we are targeting another vulnerable groups, which are the households, poor households, households living in a poverty, low-income households. We have 330 projects from the three regions, and we are expecting at the beginning of the next year to have contracts. This is for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And as I mentioned earlier, if any of our panelists would like to intervene as well, please feel free to raise your hand at any point. Perhaps we could turn now to the point on funding accessibility, which has been sort of a big topic in our dialogue so far. So here again, I would invite the ministry to begin the reflection, but I would invite all panelists to also contribute. What can national and regional governments do to foster accessibility of just transition funding and engagement of marginalized groups in the just transition planning?
Yes, thank you for this question. It's my turn to say some words. First of all, it's very important to say that the Ministry of Regional Development and the managing authority of the Regional Development Program has very big experience in implementing and financing, supporting infrastructural measures and all kinds of infrastructural projects, road infrastructure, modernization of education facilities, health infrastructure, urban environment, streets, parks, etc., etc. In our work, in each of these projects, vulnerable groups are more or less targeted. Sometimes for their involvement, the project receives more points in the prioritization list. Sometimes the eligibility criteria are written in this way that gives the prioritization also for this kind of project. So my point is that the infrastructural projects funded by the Ministry of Regional Development always take into account in some way or other the vulnerable groups. And this is the main obstacle for us to identify where is the appropriate place for marginalized groups in just transition process. Because just transition, is focused not only, but mainly on the workers most affected by the closure of power plants and enterprises. Just transition is also focused on the local economy, on creating of jobs, and this is in the core of Just Transition Fund and in the core of our work. So Monica said about the structured 3 subcommittees in each region, and we expect from them to have good ideas and good practices for sharing to us to involve somehow marginalized groups in our work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just trying to see if anyone has raised their hand. No? Okay. I think we can also, as we see our colleagues from World Without Borders are back, maybe we can move on to the point about the role of civil society in this conversation. I would invite our colleagues to please introduce themselves, as we didn't get the chance to do so earlier. Yes.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
You can hear us this time. Everything looked perfect at the start. Let me only make sure that Milena is also available at the other end.
Yes, I'm here.
With translation, but I'd rather her represent the organizations that we stand behind. Би ли желала да започнеш?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for attention. Можеш ти да кажеш няколко думи за организацията, защото сме напреднали във времето.
Very briefly only, let me introduce ourselves. Milena and Stanimira from World Without Borders, Stara Zagora, Bulgaria. In our work, we are focusing on supporting marginalized groups in the Stara Zagora region, with a special emphasis on the Roma community. And our initiatives include projects for social integration, access for education and healthcare, as well as advocacy for the inclusion of these communities in the Just Transition process. Our understanding is that the participation of the marginalized groups is crucial for the success of the policies related to the green transition. And therefore, we strive for building bridges between them and the institutions. Would you like to proceed, Milena? Basically, if you help us maybe with questions on your side.
Yes, thank you for introducing yourself, and we're glad that you're able to unmute yourself. So my question to you would be, if in your experience you've observed any specific strands in the just transition, and maybe we can also move to the next slide so all of the participants can see the Slido. If there's any specific strands you've observed in the Just Transition project calls addressing civil society or these marginalized communities, and what are the strengths and weaknesses of those?
So basically, Milena, would you like to discuss or?
Yeah, okay. Това, което бихме искали да кажем за силните страни на проектите е следното.
What we would like to discuss with regards to the strengths of the JT project.
Тук всъщност при нас, като регион Стара Загора, който е ключово зависим от въглищната индустрия.
The Stara Zagora region is very much dependent on the coal mining industry.
Ще се смекчат, т.е. надяваме се да се смекчат социалните и икономически ефекти от прехода.
Well, in this connection, we very much hope that the effect from the economic effects of the transition will be mitigated.
Освен това, поканите и проектите подкрепят инвестиции в зелените технологии и устойчивото развитие.
The calls and investments, they do support green technology and innovation.
Да не пропускаме и подкрепата за малки и средни предприятия.
Let me not miss the support for small and medium-sized enterprises here.
Тъй като ние сме организация, която предлага достъп до различни услуги, включително и образование, за нас е важно.
Since we are an organization providing access to various social services, including education.
За нас са от решаващо значение възможностите за обучение и преквалификация.
For us, really crucial are the possibilities for training and reskilling programs. Shall we proceed with the weaknesses, or?
Yes, please.
Is it only the strengths that you'd like to hear about? Milena, shall we proceed with the weaknesses then? Слабостите да продължим.
Добре, всъщност сложността на административната процедура не е никак за пренебрегване.
Well, we shouldn't miss here the complex administrative procedure.
И всъщност тук поставяме въпроса за това какво правят малките общини и малките организации, за да могат да участват активно и ефективно.
The question here is what are the small municipalities doing here and organizations in order to take part in the process?
Все още е под въпрос каква ще бъде целенасочената подкрепа за маргинализираните групи с конкретните мерки.
How about the marginalized groups and the support in this aspect? There's no clarity so far.
И всъщност, докато акцентът е само върху икономическите проекти и развитието на бизнеса, какво се случва?
And since the accent is on the economic after effects and the investments,
какво се случва с социалната инфраструктура?
The question remains what's going on with the social infrastructure, for example.
И дългосрочните проблеми всъщност с интеграцията на засегнатите общности.
With the integration of the affected communities.
Това са нашите питанки през цялото време.
all these are questions that we still don't have an answer for. Thank you very much, everyone. If you have anything to ask.
Thank you very much. I also see that on the Slido we have one of the weaknesses as one of the major criticisms of Bulgaria's GAT project calls is the complexity of the bureaucratic processes involved in applying for applying and accessing funds. I wonder if the ministry or any of our other academics who are joined here today would like to reflect on this. Perhaps someone who has not spoken yet. Yes, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. If you allow me to say a few words in response of Mrs. Ilieva's question about the social infrastructure and targeted support for vulnerable groups. I have to say that we cannot expect from the Just Transition Funds to resolve all the issues and all the problems of the marginalized group in the 3 core regions. As I said, the Just Transition Fund has its own specific target groups and specific focus. In this regard, I can present the other types of support for marginalized groups in the 3 regions. For example, Stara Zagora is eligible for funding under the Territorial Instruments for Sustainable Urban Development under the Program for Development of Regions. The instrument Integrated Territorial Investments, ITIs, is also another good form for support projects directly proposed by the vulnerable groups and projects that are targeted to vulnerable groups. So in this regard, I think that the main help and main focus for the vulnerable groups should be seek in the other available forms and programs and projects. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please, Archer, go ahead.
Right. Regarding the strengths and weaknesses, I think when we observe the variety of players coming into the meetings and trying to understand the particular measures and requirements, I think the managing authority realized that the way they can grasp the whole picture and the need for support that was requested from these potential beneficiaries, it cannot be helped in that big, let's say, kaleidoscope. So one of the things that they did, of course, was to make the whole the call very much bureaucratic, and I think that was mentioned by means of saying that it's very bureaucratic, and that's one of the weaknesses. So turning the perspective of managing authority, I think it can be helped somehow, and it's being done with a lot of events where people are really becoming more knowledgeable, the potential beneficiaries, as there is a clear part of sessions like Q&As where people ask questions and they really receive feedback with a lot of valuable knowledge how to apply. But on the other hand, I think one of the critical points that we observed was that, at least for Upper Silesia, that it's really helpful if you have one of the criteria that predominantly pushes the beneficiaries to collaborate. And I'm referring here to the fact that in this particular call, the measure that I described in my presentation, there is a requirement, or let's say a strong belief, that if those applicants will form a partnership, a collaboration with civil society groups, then it will be easier for reaching out to marginalized communities. And at the same time, it will be easier for the managing authority to be reassured that this money goes directly into the hands of those in need. So what I'm saying is that on the one hand, the strength of these calls, at least what I observe in Upper Silesia, is that they are really well digested thanks to a number of years of experience. So the skillful, let's say, building of the whole application call with the criteria well defined is something that helps the managing authority. And on the other hand, it really makes sure that if you want to apply, you can apply, but then you really need to be skilled enough. And for that, I think, as you already mentioned, one of the previous questions, I think, was into that. I think you need not only to have these collaborations, but you also need to think of let's say we can call them the gatekeepers. So if you have a marginalized community, they probably don't have skills to apply for money, but there is somebody that links them to an organization or somebody that is skillful enough to apply for the money. So those gatekeepers are particularly important. And when we talk to our civil society or activist groups, they always mention that for them, it's easier to help those marginalized groups if they have some instruments to be more knowledgeable about what's on the table, how it can be used. So it's like a cascade, it's like step-by-step procedure where there is no easy solution, there's no one-fits-for-all policy. But I think with this type of dialogues that we've had, we've managed to understand many of those bottlenecks, and we've managed probably also to help the managing authority to dismiss those weaknesses. So in that sense, I think there's a lot of learnings that we've managed to come up with during these bolster sessions that we've been organizing. In particular, I think that's also related to the specificity of multi-actor fora, which is a very simple but very effective way of reaching out to particular groups that probably never heard of Just Transition, but then they start to realize that it's something there, and of course they have this pure need of simple things to survive in many cases because they cannot afford a lot. But then they realize that if they gradually, step by step, if they grasp those ideas, they could often help themselves. And it's not only about these simple things like having a place where they can stay with good heating, but it's also the way that they can talk about the future. They can talk about how their life could improve. And these multi-actor fora that we are organizing within Bolster, I think that's also an interesting story. Of course, it's given new opportunities because of these small funding projects that we are launching, more or less the same as I explained in this 1024 call. Small money, probably around 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 euros that can really change a lot. The question is, as I mentioned, sustainability. To what extent this can be maintained for a longer period? And I think that's one of the main challenges, if we can say, for managing authorities, not only to spend the money, but to prove to the European Commission that the money will really give back to the others. Sorry for being long, but I think that's it glues some of those conversations that we've had. Thank you.
Thank you, Artur. No, I think that really puts everything together of what has been said so far. And perhaps we can move on to the next question, which would be more about any relevant initiatives or local best practices that we've observed. So my question would be, are there relevant initiatives, best practices developed by local civil society to foster inclusion and buy-in of marginalized groups concerning the just transition? And here I would really invite Professor Darina Zaimova to maybe start off the conversation with her experience in the education sector area.
So thank you very much, Savannah. I actually incidentally raised my hand because I was waiting for this question. Not that I couldn't intervene in the previous topics, but I feel, let's say, confident in the institutional mechanisms and the principle of being tailor-made to the initiatives that has been taken at the institutional level. First, I would like to start with something very personal. I was born in Stara Zagora. I lived in Stara Zagora, although I have experience in living in different European cities, including Kazakhstan, nearby to the biggest coal mining region that is Ekibastuz. So I can make a difference of what is happening in countries that are not located in the European Union and how actually the Green Deal and the green transition is affecting these countries. First of all, I'd like to say that Stara Zagora is a very beautiful town, very good opportunities due to the infrastructure that we are building, to the business that we are diversifying, including in the recent years introducing new technologies and digitalization in our region. And this is partially because of the imminent threat that we will face by losing jobs and of course facing the problem of what kind of employment we will offer. So it was mentioned that 11,000 jobs will be lost. Actually, when we were invited to be part of structuring just transition plans for the region, the calculations were even more pessimistic because they included not only the people directly employed, not only the people that are working in the companies that are providing services or products for the sectors in the coal mining industry, but also these are the family members, the young people that will be finishing school by 2030. And then comes the group of the vulnerable people. I mean, all the people that are neither in the education or employment, or the people with from the minorities or people with disabilities. So we are speaking about approximately 150,000 people in our region. So it's a huge problem because it is like a snowball. And in this problematic situation, although I'm not speaking about the problems because we are speaking about the best practices and initiatives, the university has a very delicate and very important role. Because it was mentioned a couple of times that there is a mismatch, there is a gap between the qualification of the people and basically what the new labor market will be requesting when addressing the transition. Okay, we are, let's say, putting the coal mining industry to a level that is less important for the entire industry in the region and in the country. How we are going to substitute this business, how we are going to complement and how we are going to diversify, and which will be the key driving machine that will trigger the new source of economic development. So in this search, the university had a very, let's say, strong position that we need to be addressing not only the needs for the children, the students that are coming to our university, but also to be targeting the people who will be probably leaving the coal mining industry. And here comes the difficult part, because you see, these are not young people that will be leaving this industry. These are people that have been working this for almost for all their lives. So it's really tricky to provide something that is tailor-made in the absence or in a limited access to new businesses that will substitute the coal mining industry. Still, the university is, I don't know, for the people who are not very well aware of the profile of the university, we are a bit, okay, not a bit, I'm not going to be modest here. We are one of the 5th best universities in the country and offer multidisciplinary education. Therefore, we are addressing everything that starts from the ground, from the soil, starting with the agricultural sector. We are going through the veterinary medicine, the techniques and technology, education, economics, pedagogy, medicine. So we are almost closing all the necessities that a community might need in terms of, let's say, trying to add value all along the production value chain in the case of substituting the coal mining and the energy and to provide, of course, some infrastructure and knowledge for developing, for example, economy that is built upon the renewable energy sources. Having said that, maybe it's very good to focus on the relevant initiatives and best practices, which is actually the question. So first of all, I have to say that Trakia University is the coordinator of the small hydrogen valley that is called Zahir. It is a project that is building upon how the green economy, the hydrogen economy, is going to let's say, support the sustainability of the economic growth and sustainability of the community by addressing, and here is something that is new probably for the audience, by addressing not only Stara Zagora region, but we involved in this new journey for us, Kyustendil municipality and also Karlovo municipality, which will hopefully stimulate this good practice and could be transformed into something that could be, let's say, multiplied as effect and good example. The project is in very beginning, but still we know that we are going to the right direction by introducing renewable energy sources as part of the energy sources that will be sources for the future. Shortly after approval of the Zahir project, we are in progress of concluding a completely brand new project that is especially targeting the matching the skills of the new version of the labor market, with actually the qualification of the young people and the people that will be hypothetically leaving the coal mining industry. These are very big projects that will be supporting not only the community, but they could be affecting also the renewable energy sources, economy and education in the neighboring countries, because we are in contact with similar projects that are already ongoing and let's say showing progress. Apart from building, let's say, piloting hydrogen economy, we are also targeting the new disciplines that are focusing on the new knowledge about renewables, the new knowledge about bioeconomy, the new knowledge about how agriculture could be part of this green transition in a way whereby to support phasing out the coal mining industry. And we are very happy to say that we are not alone in this, basically because we are working with one of the leading universities in Europe that will lead us and show us, let's say, the good examples of their phasing out. And of course, of course, it's copy-paste, it's never working. I mean, I started with this, that we know in every country how well and what are the pitfalls and what are the good examples of that transition. The fact is that Bulgaria is very different, and it's very difficult to outline what part of the good things we can take, because we don't know how the community, how the economy will react to something that was good, for example, economy in another European countries. But what we could do, of course, is to build upon our own resources and our own, let's say, advantages in order to speed up this process. Someone from the previously speaking colleagues mentioned the local identity, and I think that this is something that we should really focus on when providing for the new, let's say, transitioning, because it's going to be green, but in a couple of years we should face something different. We should not forget that we started with the social entrepreneurship, that we went through the eco-entrepreneurship, and now we are going for something that is blue, green, or we don't know in the future what kind of activities the nature basically will request from us. I'm not sure whether I spoke too much, but thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much for your intervention. It was really comprehensive and tying everything together and from your perspective. And I think about this point about identity is really relevant as we are tackling this right now, but things are always changing and we need to always adapt to these changes. I don't see anyone's hands raised up, so I'm not sure if anyone would like to intervene to this question. If not, I can move on to the final question, where we conclude this discussion to consider what the role of the EU should be. And with that, I would ask our panelists to reflect on what can the EU do to foster accessibility of just transition funding and engagement of marginalized groups in just transition planning. From the discussions we've had earlier on.
Yes, if you allow me to start with some thoughts from the perspective of the managing authority. Yes, for sure. You are right that sometimes the procedures are very bureaucratic. The mechanism for project preparation and applying for funding is maybe too complex. But for the moment, for the current programming period, Just Transition Fund is one of the other European funds. Although it has its own specific regulation, it is also in the common provision regulations with other European funds, and all these procedures. We also in Bulgaria have a very heavy national legislation. We have a specific law for European funds. We have many orders and sub-laws documents. So yes, I can confirm that sometimes the just transition procedures are very complex. So maybe in the next programming period, in the near future, the topic of just transition and the support for just transition process could be excluded from the common European funds and could be paved its own path. This could be one suggestion for the European Commission from our side. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, please, Archer.
I think your question can be divided into two, namely, number one is the vertical, let's say, collaboration, which means that fostering the accessibility of the funding needs to have people cooperating, at least if not collaborating, at different levels of government, which means that in many cases it touches on central and regional and local level. I think with Bolster, we've observed that, for instance, in Wallonia, it wasn't the case. And that was one of the reasons why the voices of those at the very local level were not heard, because then we come to the second part, which is the horizontal cooperation, which is more natural for local governments to cooperate with civil society or the groups that are most vulnerable. Then the local level was not heard, and the regional level, which was negotiating with the European Commission. So in these vertical and horizontal patterns, I think the mechanism of fostering accessibility of JT funding can be easily mounted. And then if you observe that this is particularly the case in your region, in your program, then maybe it's also a matter of discussing with the European Commission how to channel down those messages and how to raise them from bottom to up. The messages that we have, basically with the observations from bolster or dust, as we mentioned, there are several projects dealing with that. Thank you.
Yes, please, Darina, go ahead.
Well, I have a slightly different, let's say, experience. Of course, bureaucracy is part of the funding procedures, and bureaucracy is also part of, let's say, mitigating the risk and trying to be focused on every possible problem that might arise while implementing the project and, of course, the funding. So we are more or less used to bureaucracy, and it is part of the process. And it's not the biggest problem in this entire picture. In order to have the marginalized groups really affected, probably the role of the organizations of the similar to what Milena and Stanimira are representing today is very important, because in the projects that we are implementing that are funding through different funding resources, we are working a lot of organizations like NGOs or business incubators, companies, and they're somehow reflecting the real necessities that should be affected by the funding. So this bottom-up approach is something that should be initiated bottom-up, or at least this is my perspective. Otherwise, if it's top-down initiated, it might be a little bit exaggerated, or let's say change the direction due to misunderstanding. So I think that the role of the representativeness of these vulnerable groups, starting from the bottom up, is more important, and it should be initiated bottom up. And the role of the NGOs, once again, and all the foundations, associations, it's very important, because they are regionally based and they know the best the problems and the needs of the groups that we are addressing with today's meeting.
Thank you very much.
Ако може да се включим само за няколко секунди. Мира?
May we take the stage? Thank you. Thank you.
Всъщност Стара Загора има едно предимство пред другите региони.
In fact, Stara Zagora has an advantage in comparison with the other regions.
Основните заинтересовани страни по прехода на местно ниво, регионално ниво, се познават.
The main stakeholders involved in the transition
работят от години заедно по една или друга инициатива и кампания.
For years, they have been working on one initiative or campaign or another.
И всъщност неправителствените организации в наше лице нямаме проблем за комуникация с община, с областна администрация, а най-малко с Тракийския университет.
In this sense, we do not have any trouble liaising with, let's say, the local authorities, such as municipality, let alone Trachea University.
Това всъщност ни води до нещо ключово.
This takes us to a key point here.
Мисията не е невъзможна.
In other words, the mission is not impossible.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you both for those concluding remarks on this. I've also seen one of the questions in the chat from Ava from FEANSA about some examples from JTPs and measures that include energy efficiency. Our last dialogue actually touched upon energy poverty, and there were some discussion about energy, like efficient renovation of housing for this purpose. So perhaps when the summary is up, you can check that out. But I see that also Archer replied to your question with an example from the UK. So thank you everyone for this engaging discussion today. It was really, really packed with a lot of important information and interventions. As we approach the conclusion, I would maybe invite Kristina Nikolova to give a concluding remark, if possible, as we really have only 2 minutes left. I see you're unmuted, but I cannot hear you. Otherwise, I thank everyone for being here today and for the interesting discussion. We will be organizing more policy dialogues, so we hope to see you in the next one. As I mentioned, the recording of today's session will be online, and we will also be preparing a summary that we will share with you. So we hope to see you in the next policy dialogue, and I wish everyone a very, very great day. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for leading this meeting.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a
Thank
great day.
you. See you soon.
Thank you.